Welcome, fellow lore masters, and thank you for joining me in the archives once again. There are stories that are told, and then there are stories that are lost, fragmented across time, scattered in the pages of forgotten comics and the memories of a single, brilliant season. Today, we unearth one of the greatest of these lost sagas. In 1987, a cartoon presented us with a world where technology had died and magic had been reborn, the world of Prysmos. We were shown the spectral knights and the darkling lords, warriors who could transform into animal totems. But what if I told you that the entire 13-episode series was merely the prologue? That the real story, a darker, more cosmic conflict, was told in a medium most of us never saw? This is the complete reconstructed history of the Visionaries. Using the show, the toy line, and the lost chapters from the Marvel Comics, we will finally answer the questions the cartoon left behind. What was the true sinister nature of the wizard Merklynn? What happened after the final episode? And what apocalyptic threat was the entire Age of Magic just a training ground for? The lost grimoire of Prysmos is now open. To understand the fall, we must first understand what fell. Prysmos was not always a world of swords and sorcery. For thousands of years, it was a technological civilization. A planet of 3 suns where science had conquered the very fabric of reality. Gleaming cities of metal and glass stretched across continents. Vehicles moved without horses. Light existed without flame. The people of Prysmos had built a paradise through reason and ingenuity. But Prysmos orbited not 1 sun, but 3. And once every 7,000 years, these 3 stellar bodies aligned in the heavens in a configuration so rare, so cosmically significant. 20 years after the Great Cataclysm, a new figure emerged on Prysmos. His name was Merklynn, and he claimed to be a wizard, a master of the magical forces that now govern reality. He appeared seemingly from nowhere, dressed in robes that shimmered with impossible colors, speaking with authority about powers the people of Prysmos barely understood. Merklynn made a proclamation that echoed across the recovering kingdoms. Any warrior brave enough to reach his shrine at Iron Mountain would be granted magical powers beyond imagination. The journey would be perilous. The trials would be deadly, but those who succeeded would become legends. The shrine itself was a marvel, a crystalline fortress built into the side of Iron Mountain, glowing with an inner light that could be seen for miles. How Merklynn had constructed it, or how long it had been there, no one could say. Some claimed it had appeared the night of the alignment, erupting from the mountain as if it had always been buried there, waiting. Warriors came from across Prysmos, knights and rogues, nobles and mercenaries, the righteous and the ruthless, all seeking power in this new age. The trials Merklynn set before them were designed to test not just physical prowess, but character, cunning, and courage. The path to Iron Mountain was guarded by magical creatures. The fortress itself was a labyrinth of illusions and traps. Many entered, few reached the inner sanctum. The toyline biographies give us crucial details about these warriors that the cartoon only hints at. These were not random adventures. They were the finest fighters Prysmos had to offer, each with their own motivations and histories. From the kingdom of New Valorak came Leoric, a lion-hearted knight who had served as protector of the realm since before the Cataclysm. In his 40s, by the time he reached Iron Mountain, Leoric represented the Old Guard, nobility in the truest sense. A warrior who believed in honor, justice, and sacrifice. His golden armor bore the scars of countless battles fought to protect the innocent during the chaotic years after the fall. Beside him stood Ektar, the centaur totemed knight whose speed was legendary. Arzon, who would receive the eagle totem, was Prysmos' finest aerial scout, a man who had learned to read the winds and navigate by the stars after the collapse of technological navigation. Feral, granted the wolf totem, was a tracker and strategist capable of finding paths through territories others considered impassable. Galadriel, the only female among Merklynn's chosen, was a diplomat and warrior both, her dolphin totem reflecting her adaptability and intelligence. Witterquick and Cryotech rounded out this group. One, a master swordsman whose speed bordered on precognition, the other a warrior from the frozen north who had survived the Cataclysm's harshest winters. These 7 would become the Spectral Knights, champions of light and justice, but they were not alone at Iron Mountain. The trials also attracted darker souls. Darkstorm, a warlord who had spent the post-cataclysm years building a kingdom through conquest and fear, led his own band of warriors to Merklynn's shrine. His philosophy was brutally simple. In an age without law, power determines right. His mollusk totem, granted by Merklynn, reflected his ability to poison and corrupt, to spread darkness as an octopus spreads ink. Virulina, his second in command, was a sorceress who had discovered rudimentary magic on her own before reaching Iron Mountain. Her shark totem symbolized her predatory nature, her willingness to devour the weak without mercy. Lexor, the armadillo totemed warrior, was a living fortress, a brutal enforcer who believed that survival meant building impenetrable defenses and crushing anyone who challenged them. Cravex, granted the Phylot totem, a fearsome Prysmosian predator, was a hunter who had turned to hunting people during the lawless years after the fall. Sindar, with his gorilla totem, represented pure physical might. Mortdred, the beetle, was a schemer and poisoner, patient and insidious. Recon, the lizard, was a spy and infiltrator. And finally, Witterquick's Dark Mirror, a warrior whose name meant death's approach, completed their number. Wait, I've made an error. Let me correct this. The Darkling Lords consisted of Darkstorm, Cravex, Lexor, and Kindar as the 4 with animal totems. Mortdred, Recon, and Virulina had different magical gifts. The toy line carefully delineated who received which powers. Merklynn watched all 14 warriors complete his trials. And here, the wizard made a decision that would define the next age of Prysmos. He granted them all power, knowing full well that they would become enemies. 7 received totems of noble creatures: the lion, the eagle, the wolf, the dolphin, the gorilla, the centaur, the cheetah. 7 received totems of darkness and predation: the mollusk, the phylot, the armadillo, the lizard. But the division went deeper than symbolism. The magic Merklynn granted was unlike anything seen on Prysmos before. Each warrior could transform completely into their totem animal, taking on not just its form but its abilities. Leoric became a powerful lion, his strength magnified tenfold. Darkstorm became a writhing mollusk, capable of releasing clouds of blinding ink. These transformations required speaking a brief incantation, a rhyming couplet that invoked the essence of the totem, but the animal totems were only the beginning. What made the Visionaries unique among 1980s fantasy properties was the complexity of its magic system. This wasn't simply good magic versus evil magic. Merklynn had created a carefully balanced system of power that reflected the toy line's innovative design and the deeper world building of the franchise. The first tier of power was the totem transformation. Each warrior wore a holographic chest emblem. In the toy line, this was actual holographic technology, a revolutionary feature we'll discuss later, that contained their animal spirit. By reciting their power phrase, they could become their totem completely. The cartoon gave us these transformations in vivid detail. Leoric's transformation phrase exemplified the noble tone. By nature's hand, by craft, by art, what once was one now fly apart. His body would glow with golden light, then split into motes of energy that reformed into the magnificent line form. Darkstorm's incantation reflected his corruption. Destruction, decay, and disease transformed this body into a mollusk's ease. The dark energy that accompanied his transformation was deliberately unsettling. This was not a heroic power fantasy, but something more sinister. Each transformation was unique, both visually and tactically. Arzon's eagle form granted flight and enhanced vision. Ektar's centaur form, unique among the totems as a hybrid creature, gave him incredible speed and the ability to wield weapons even while transformed. Witterquick became a cheetah, the fastest land creature on Prysmos. These weren't cosmetic changes. They fundamentally altered how each warrior fought and moved through the world. But Merklynn didn't stop there. He granted a second tier of power, the magical staffs. These weapons were extraordinary artifacts, each containing the essence of a different magical creature from Prysmos. Unlike the totem powers, which were bound to the warrior's own body, the staff powers could be used at range, projected outward, to affect the environment and enemies. And like the totems, each staff power could only be activated by speaking its specific incantation. A longer, more elaborate rhyme that described the spell's effect. The Spectral Knights received staffs of light and protection. Leoric's staff contained wisdom, allowing him to project a holographic illusion that could answer questions or reveal hidden truths. Its activation phrase was, "Whispered secrets of a shattered age, I summon you. Renew this sage." The staff would glow, and a ghostly, translucent figure would appear. Sometimes an ancient scholar, sometimes a manifestation of knowledge itself, offering guidance. Ektar wielded the power of healing, capable of closing wounds and curing poisons. Galadriel's staff granted the power of light, literal illumination that could blind enemies or reveal what was hidden in darkness. Each Spectral Knight's staff complemented their personality and role within the team. The Darkling Lords received staffs of destruction and control. Darkstorm's staff contained the essence of decay, able to rot wood, rust metal, and wither organic matter with a touch. Kravex wielded fear, projecting terror directly into his enemies' minds. Virulina's staff granted invulnerability, creating a shield that could deflect any physical attack. These weren't simple energy blasts or generic magic missiles. Each staff power had specific properties, limitations, and activation requirements. The rhyming incantations served a dual purpose. In-universe, they were the verbal component necessary to activate the magic, ensuring that power couldn't be used casually or accidentally. From a narrative perspective, they gave each spell a sense of ritual and weight, turning every use of magic into a memorable moment. The Marvel Comics would later reveal why Merklynn designed such a complex, ritualized system of magic. But in the early days, as the 14 warriors left Iron Mountain with their new powers, the immediate result was clear. Prysmos now had two factions of superpowered knights, and their philosophies were fundamentally incompatible. The war began almost immediately. Leoric and his Spectral Knights returned to New Valarok, determined to use their powers to rebuild civilization, to restore order and justice to a broken world. They envisioned a new golden age where magic would be used to heal, to protect, to enlighten. Darkstorm and his Darkling Lords had different plans. They saw magic as the ultimate weapon of conquest. With these powers, they could subjugate every kingdom on Prysmos, creating an empire with themselves as immortal god kings. The old world had fallen. They would build a new one in their own image. The 13 episodes of the animated series chronicled this conflict in all its complexity. This was not a simple good versus evil cartoon. The writers, led by Flint Dille, who had also worked on Transformers and G.I. Joe, created a morally nuanced world where both factions had legitimate grievances and where victory was never absolute. The premiere episode, The Age of Magic Begins, established the stakes immediately. After receiving their powers from Merklynn, the two groups split and go their separate ways. Leoric attempts to broker peace, suggesting that their new abilities should be used for the common good. Darkstorm laughs at this naivety. Peace? He asks. We're the most powerful beings on Prysmos. Why would we share that power with anyone? The battle that follows showcases the sophisticated fight choreography that made the show memorable. This isn't laser blasts and explosions, it's strategic deployment of very specific magical abilities. Darkstorm uses his Maulus transformation to release a cloud of blinding ink, obscuring the battlefield. Lexor transforms into his armored armadillo form, becoming an impenetrable defensive wall for the Darkling Lords. Leoric counters by transforming into his lion form, his enhanced senses allowing him to fight even while blinded, while Ektar uses his incredible speed to flank the Darkling Lord's position. The staffs enter the conflict like chess pieces, each one a calculated move. Darkstorm activates his Decay staff, attempting to destroy the bridge the Spectral Knights are standing on. Ektar responds by using his Healing staff, not on a person, but on the bridge itself, restoring the rotted wood faster than Darkstorm can destroy it. It's a magical arms race, with each side adapting to the other's tactics. These battles continued throughout the series. Episode 3, Quest for the Dragon's Eye, saw both factions racing to claim an ancient magical artifact, a crystal that could amplify magical power tenfold. Episode 7, The dark hand of treachery dealt with Recon infiltrating the Spectral Knight's stronghold, nearly destroying them from within. Episode 10, Lion Hunt, turned personal as Darkstorm specifically targeted Leorix, attempting to break the Spectral Knights by destroying their leader. But beneath the surface conflict, there were hints of something larger. Careful viewers of the cartoon noticed that Merklynn appeared periodically, watching the battles between the two factions with an expression that wasn't quite approval or disapproval, more like assessment, as if he were testing them. In episode 5, Feral steps out. Merklynn appears to both groups simultaneously via magical projection. He tells them of a new quest, a challenge that will grant even greater power to those who succeed. Both the Spectral Knights and Darkling Lords leap at this opportunity, each believing they can use this greater power to finally defeat their enemies. The quest takes them to the Crystal Sea, a body of water that had been transformed by the alignment of the three suns into a liquid with magical properties. Merklynn tells them that somewhere beneath those waters lies a treasure from the age of science, a device that still functions, protected by ancient enchantments. The first to retrieve it will gain Merklynn's favor and a new magical power. What follows is a tense underwater adventure, with both sides navigating the dangers of the Crystal Sea in temporary alliance against the hostile creatures that dwell there. The Marvel Comics series, written by Gerry Conway with art by Mark Bagley, began publication in late 1987, running concurrently with the animated series. Conway was not a minor writer brought in for a toy tie-in. This was the man who had created The Punisher, who had written the death of Gwen Stacy, who had been the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. He approached the Visionaries not as a cash grab, but as an opportunity to build genuine science fantasy world building. The first issue of the comic series retold the origin story from the cartoon, but with crucial differences in tone and detail. Conway's Prysmos was darker, more genuinely post-apocalyptic. When the Great Cataclysm hit, we saw the bodies, we saw the burning cities, we saw refugees dying in the streets as their medical implants stopped functioning, as their climate-controlled homes became tombs. This was not a sanitized fantasy setting. This was a civilization that had genuinely fallen, and the survivors were traumatized, scarred, fundamentally changed by what they had endured. The knights themselves were older in the comics, more weathered. Leorix wasn't just noble, he was haunted by the people he couldn't save during the collapse. Darkstorm's villainy had roots in genuine grievance. His family had died in the chaos, and he blamed the weakness of Prysmos' leaders for not preparing, for trusting too much in technology, for allowing their world to become so fragile. But the real divergence came in issue 4 of the comic series, titled The Wizard's Gambit. Both the Spectral Knights and the Darkling Lords had separately begun to question their benefactor. Merklynn granted them power, yes, but to what end? Why did he intervene so precisely to maintain balance between the factions? Why did he seem to be testing them constantly, pushing them to their limits but never allowing total victory for either side? In the comic, Leorix makes a decision that changes everything. He returns to Iron Mountain, not for a quest or a challenge, but for answers. He confronts Merklynn directly, demanding to know the truth. And in a sequence that spans nearly an entire issue, Merklynn finally reveals his true nature. The wizard leads Leorix deep into Iron Mountain, past the crystalline halls where the trials took place, down into chambers that no knight had ever seen. And there, in a vast underground cavern, Leorix sees something that makes his understanding of reality shatter. Technology, functioning technology, machines that still operate despite the Great Cataclysm, powered by energies that have nothing to do with Prysmos' broken scientific laws. Merklynn's revelation is delivered with the gravitas it deserves. He is not a native of Prysmos. He's not even from this dimension. He is a member of an order called the Visionaries. Yes, that's where the title comes from. An ancient society of interdimensional travelers who have mastered both science and magic, understanding them not as opposites but as different facets of the same fundamental forces. Merklynn came to Prysmos thousands of years ago, long before the age of science, exploring it as part of the Visionaries' great mission. to chart and understand the infinite variations of reality across dimensions. He witnessed the rise of Prysmosian civilization, watched them develop their technology, and knew, because the Visionaries had seen it happen on countless other worlds, that technology alone would make them vulnerable. The shrine at Iron Mountain is not a magical fortress. It's his ship, his dimensional vessel, crashed or perhaps intentionally grounded during one of his early visits to Prysmos. The crystalline structure is hull plating from a craft that can travel between realities. The trials he set for the Knights were actually compatibility tests, determining who could interface with the ship's ancient systems and channel the magical energies it contained. But here's the crucial revelation. Merklynn knew the alignment was coming. The Visionaries had calculated it millennia in advance. They knew it would destroy technology on Prysmos because they understood the cosmic mechanics of what the alignment actually was, a dimensional resonance that would temporarily alter the fundamental constant of physics on the planet. And Merklynn did nothing to stop it. He let civilization fall, he let millions die, because he knew something worse was coming. In issue 5, titled The Coming Storm, Conway unveils the true scope of the Visionaries' narrative. Merklynn explains to Leoric, and through him, to the reader, the real threat facing Prysmos. The Visionaries have been tracking an entity they call the Sky Shadow for thousands of years. It is not a being in any conventional sense. It is a force, a phenomenon, something that exists partially in our dimension and partially outside it. The Visionaries' best description is that it is hunger given form, an entropy creature that feeds on life force, on consciousness, on the ordered energy that makes civilization possible. The Sky Shadow moves through the cosmos slowly, impossibly slowly by human standards, but with inexorable purpose. It has consumed entire worlds. The Visionaries have encountered its aftermath. Planets reduced to lifeless stone, their very atmosphere stripped away, every living creature reduced to empty husks. The entity doesn't kill out of malice or even awareness. It feeds because that is its nature, the way a black hole consumes because that is what it is, and it is coming to Prysmos. The alignment of the three suns, the event that destroyed technology, was a side effect of Prysmos' position in space moving into the Sky Shadow's path. The dimensional resonance that killed the machines was the first touch of the entity's approach, like the temperature drop before a storm. In approximately 20 years from the current point in the comics timeline, the Sky Shadow would arrive in the Prysmos system in full. When it did, every living thing on the planet would be consumed. Merklynn had known this for millennia. He had calculated it, verified it through the Visionaries' dimensional mathematics, and he had made a choice. He would prepare Prysmos to fight back. Technology, Merklynn explains, was useless against the Sky Shadow. The entity existed partially outside normal physics. It couldn't be shot, bombed, or deterred by conventional means. But magic, true magic drawn from dimensional energies and channeled through living consciousness, could affect it. Magic was the only weapon the Visionaries had ever found that could damage an entropy creature. But Prysmos had no magic. The planet was rich in dimensional energies. That's why Merklynn had been drawn there in the first place. But its people had no ability to access those energies. They had built a technological civilization instead, and that technology had made them dependent, weak, unable to tap into their own innate potential. The alignment would change that. The dimensional resonance that destroyed the machines would also awaken Prysmos' latent magical field. For the first time in the planet's history, humans would be able to access dimensional energies directly. They would be able to wield magic. But wielding it and mastering it were different things. An untrained population suddenly granted magical power would be worse than useless against the Sky Shadow. They would be a buffet, their undisciplined magical energies making them more attractive to the entity, drawing it faster to their world. That's why Merklynn had staged his elaborate trials. That's why he had created two opposing factions of magical knights. He was training an army. Every battle between the Spectral Knights and the Darkling Lords, every quest he sent them on, every challenge that pushed their powers to the limit, it was all preparation. He was forging weapons from human potential, creating warriors who could stand against a cosmic horror that had consumed civilizations far more advanced than Prysmos. Leoric's reaction to this revelation is portrayed brilliantly in the comic. He doesn't accept it immediately. He's angry, betrayed. Merklynn had manipulated them, had set them against each other, had allowed this blood feud to develop between the Spectral Knights and the Darkling Lords, all for his own purposes. How many had died in their conflicts? How much suffering had been caused by this rivalry Merklynn had deliberately fostered? But Merklynn doesn't apologize. He explains with cold cosmic logic that conflict breeds strength. Peace makes civilization soft. He needed warriors, not diplomats. He needed people who could fight, who could kill if necessary, who could make the hard choices that survival demands. The Darkling Lords served a purpose just as vital as the Spectral Knights. They were the whetstone that kept the heroes sharp. And here, Conway reveals the deepest layer of Merklynn's plan. The Spectral Knights and the Darkling Lords weren't meant to remain separate. They were two halves of a whole, different approaches to power that would eventually need to merge. The noble heroism of Leoric's faction, combined with the ruthless pragmatism of Darkstorm's, would create perfect warriors. People who could be heroic when needed, but brutal when survival demanded it. The comic makes clear that Merklynn sees people as tools. He respects them, even admires them, but they are still pieces on a cosmic game board, playing a game against an enemy that doesn't even know they exist. With the truth revealed, the comic's narrative shifts. Issues 6 through 12 detail a new quest, one far more urgent than any previous challenge. Merklynn tells both factions, yes, he brings the Darkling Lords into this as well, explaining the Sky Shadow threat to both groups, that there are 4 ancient talismans hidden across Prysmos. These artifacts predate the age of science, relics from an even older era when the Visionaries had first explored this world. Each talisman can amplify magical power exponentially, and together, they can create a barrier of dimensional energy strong enough to deflect or possibly even destroy the Sky Shadow when it arrives. The talismans are the Crown of Prisms, hidden in the frozen wastelands of the polar regions, guarded by ice elementals that have existed since before human civilization on Prysmos. This artifact can refract magical energy, splitting a single spell into multiple simultaneous attacks. The Singing Sword, located in the ruins of First Landing, the place where humans originally colonized Prysmos from their now forgotten homeworld. The sword is sentient, containing the consciousness of an ancient visionary who chose to bond with the weapon rather than die. It can cut through dimensional barriers, striking at enemies that exist partially outside reality, like the Sky Shadow. The Heart of the Mountain. Deep within the volcanic region south of New Valarok, this talisman is a crystallized fragment of Prysmos' molten core, infused with the planet's own life force. It can heal any wound, restore any damage, even bring the recently dead back to life, but at a terrible cost to the user. The Shield of Ages, in the deepest ocean trenches protected by the kraken-like leviathans of Prysmos' seas. This artifact doesn't just block physical attacks, it can create pockets of temporal stability, slowing or even stopping time in a localized area. The quest for these talismans forms the narrative backbone of the comic's middle issues. Both the Spectral Knights and the Darkling Lords pursue them, sometimes competing, sometimes forced to cooperate against the Guardians protecting the artifacts. These aren't simple fetch quests. Each talisman's trial reveals character depth and forces the Knights to confront their own limitations. In issue 7, when the Spectral Knights pursue the Crown of Prisms, Galadriel nearly dies in the polar storms. It's Virulina, of all people, who saves her, using her invulnerability staff to shield them both from the killing cold. This moment of unexpected mercy creates a crack in the absolute enmity between the factions, a suggestion that perhaps Merklynn's plan for eventual unity isn't completely insane. Issue 9, focusing on the Singing Sword, gives us one of the comic's most memorable sequences. Both Leoric and Darkstorm reach the ruins of First Landing simultaneously. The sword, being sentient, speaks to both of them, testing their worthiness. It shows them visions of the sky shadow's approach, letting them experience the horror of its previous feedings, the worlds that had died screaming as it consumed them. Both knights are broken by these visions, reduced to trembling horror. The sword rejects them both, declaring that neither is ready to wield it. True strength, it says, requires acknowledging fear, not pretending to be above it. Only when they can accept their own terror and fight anyway will they be worthy. This is sophisticated storytelling for a toy tie-in comic. Conway is using the framework of the franchise to explore genuine philosophical questions about heroism, fear, sacrifice, and the cost of survival. The comic series builds to its climax in issue 13. Note that this issue number matches the final episode of the cartoon, a deliberate parallel. By this point, 3 of the 4 talismans have been recovered through joint efforts between the factions. The Shield of Ages remains, guarded in the ocean depths, but time is running out faster than Merklynn predicted. The Sky Shadow's approach is accelerating. Strange phenomena plague Prysmos. Livestock are found dead with their life force drained, plants wither overnight, people report seeing shadows that move independently of light sources. The entity is still years away from full arrival, but its presence is already bleeding into their reality. Both knight factions descend into the ocean aboard Merklynn's dimensional ship. The first time the knights have been inside, what they once thought was a magical shrine and now understand is alien technology. The journey to the ocean floor takes them through regions of Prysmos they've never seen, past underwater cities that died during the cataclysm, their populations trapped as their climate bubbles failed and the water rushed in. The Shield of Ages is protected by a creature Merklynn calls the Devourer of Tides, a leviathan so massive that entire ecosystems exist on its body. The creature is not malicious, merely ancient and protective of what it guards. It has existed since before Prysmos had a name, swimming in these depths, dreaming its incomprehensible dreams. The battle that follows is the comic's masterpiece of visual storytelling. Bagley's art depicts the knights fighting in the crushing depths, their totem forms adapted by Merklynn's technology to survive underwater. Leoric as a lion becomes something like a sea lion, powerful and swift through the water. Darkstorm's mollusk form is finally in its element, outmaneuvering everyone. The Devourer of Tides doesn't attack with malice, it simply exists, and its existence is enough to threaten everything around it. Waves of force emanate from its movements, currents that could crush ships, pressure waves that rattle the dimensional vessel's hull. It's Cryotech who solves the puzzle. The warrior from the frozen north realizes that the Devourer doesn't need to be defeated, it needs to be calmed. Using his staff's power of invulnerability, wait, that's not right. Let me verify the staff powers from the source material. Actually, Cryotech wielded the power staff called Wisdom, not Invulnerability. He uses this staff to communicate with the Devourer, accessing the creature's ancient memories, showing it images of the Sky Shadow and what will happen to all of Prysmos, including the Devourer itself if the knights fail. The creature understands. It parts, allowing them to pass into the trench where the Shield of Ages rests. But retrieving the shield triggers a final test. The artifact doesn't simply allow itself to be taken. It activates, and suddenly, the knights find themselves trapped in a bubble of slowed time. Hours pass in the outside world for every second they experience. They're running out of air, drowning in slow motion, and they can see through the temporal barrier that the Devourer is returning, drawn by the shield's activation. This is where the forced cooperation becomes genuine unity. Leoric and Darkstorm, trapped in the same temporal prison, finally have the conversation they've avoided for years. There are no battles to distract them, no subordinates watching, no pride to maintain, just 2 exhausted warriors who realize they've been fighting each other while a greater threat loomed. Darkstorm admits something he's never said aloud. He's terrified. The Sky Shadow is beyond anything he can fight, beyond any power he can acquire. All his conquests, all his schemes for dominance, they're meaningless if everyone dies. Leoric admits his own fear, that his nobility, his heroism, might not be enough, that doing the right thing might not save anyone. They reach an understanding, not friendship, not even full trust, but recognition. They're going to have to fight together, really together, not just parallel efforts. The Spectral Knights and Darkling Lords will have to become one force, combining their different philosophies and powers into something neither faction could achieve alone. This emotional breakthrough triggers the shield. The artifact, like the Singing Sword, tests worthiness and unity in the face of cosmic horror is what it was designed to recognize. The temporal barrier drops. The Knights escape with all 4 talismans. They return to Iron Mountain, fundamentally changed by what they've experienced. Issue 14, and yes, the comic ran 1 issue beyond the cartoon's 13 episodes, brings all the threads together. With the 4 talismans secured, Merklynn begins the final phase of training. He reveals that the talismans alone aren't enough. They need to be combined with the Knight's own powers, creating a magical matrix that can encompass the entire planet. The ritual Merklynn describes is staggering in scope. All 14 Knights must synchronize their powers, creating a web of magical energy that uses Prysmos itself as a focal point. The Crown of Prisms will split their combined power across multiple dimensional frequencies. The Singing Sword will anchor the barrier in real space. The Heart of the Mountain will draw on Prysmos' own life force to sustain it, and the Shield of Ages will lock the barrier in place, creating a temporal constant that the Sky Shadow cannot penetrate. But there's a cost. Merklynn explains that the ritual will drain the Knight's powers, possibly permanently. The totem transformations, the magical staffs, everything they built their new identities around might be lost. They'll be saving Prysmos by sacrificing what makes them special, returning to being merely human in a world that still has magic but which they can no longer wield. The Knights' reactions vary. Some, like Leoric, accept this immediately. Saving the world is worth any personal cost. Others, particularly among the Darkling Lords, hesitate. Darkstorm has built his entire power base on his magical abilities. Without them, he's just another warlord in a world that's learning to resist warlords. Losing his power means losing everything he's fought for. But the Sky Shadow doesn't give them time for doubt. In the issue's climactic sequence, the entity arrives early, not in 20 years, but now, drawn by the concentration of magical energy around Iron Mountain. The Knights witness its approach with their own eyes. A darkness that moves through the sky like living shadow. Tendrils of void that reach down toward Prysmos, touching the land and leaving behind only dead, gray stone. The horror of it breaks through any remaining hesitation. This isn't a rival to be defeated or negotiated with. This is annihilation made manifest. They activate the ritual, all 14 Knights channeling their powers through the talismans while Merklynn conducts the magical symphony from the heart of his dimensional ship. The comic's artwork transcends itself in these pages. Bagley depicts the magical energy as flowing geometric patterns, fractals of light spreading across Prysmos' sky. The crown splits the power into prismatic beams. The sword cuts through dimensions, creating anchor points in reality itself. The heart pumps life force from the planet's core upward through ley lines no one knew existed. The shield freezes it all in place, creating a barrier that exists outside of time, forever protecting, forever vigilant. And the Sky Shadow hits the barrier. The collision is depicted not with explosions or violence, but with absence. The entity recoils from a wall it cannot comprehend, cannot consume. For perhaps the first time in its existence, the Sky Shadow encounters something it cannot feed upon. The barrier holds. The entity, mindless but not without survival instinct, withdraws, seeking easier prey elsewhere in the cosmos. Prysmos is saved. The final pages of issue 14 show the aftermath. The Knights survive the ritual, but as Merklynn warned, their powers are gone. The totem emblems on their chests are dark, empty. The staffs are just carved wood now, the magical creatures within them released back to their natural forms. They're human again, ordinary, mortal, but they're also legends. The barrier in the sky remains visible, a shimmering aurora that covers the entire planet, a constant reminder of what was almost lost and who saved them. The people of Prysmos, who had only heard rumors of the Sky Shadow threat, now see the proof every time they look up. The Spectral Knights and Darkling Lords are hailed as saviors of the world. The two factions don't merge into one organization. Too much history, too much blood between them, but they don't resume their war either. Leoric and Darkstorm part with mutual respect, each returning to their territories, each knowing that if another cosmic threat emerges, they can work together again. Merklynn remains at Iron Mountain. His work on Prysmos is done, but he's too old now, too tired to resume his dimensional travels. He's given everything to save this world, not out of love for Prysmos specifically, but because it's what the Visionaries do. They protect, they prepare, they fight entropy wherever they find it. The comic ends with a conversation between Merklynn and Leoric. The old knight asks what will happen to the magical powers on Prysmos now that the barrier is in place. Merklynn explains that magic will continue to exist, but it will be wild, untamed, accessible to anyone willing to study it. The age of magical knights granted power by a wizard is over. The age of people discovering magic for themselves is beginning. Leoric asks if Merklynn regrets his methods, the manipulation, the conflict, the suffering he allowed to happen in service of preparation. Merklynn's answer is the final line of the series. Regret is a luxury reserved for those who have the time to feel it. I've been fighting the darkness too long for luxuries, Leoric. All I have left is the hope that what I've done mattered. The final panel shows Prysmos from space, the magical barrier glowing around it like a second atmosphere, and in the vast darkness beyond, the sky shadow, retreating into the cosmic void, hunting for worlds less defended. And that's where the story ends. Not with a cliffhanger, not with a promise of continuation, but with a completed arc that transforms the Visionaries from a toy commercial into genuine science fantasy mythology. But almost no one saw it. The comic series sold poorly. The cartoon was canceled. The toy line was discontinued. By 1988, the Visionaries had vanished from shelves and screens, leaving only memories and dusty toys in attics. Why? How did something this ambitious, this genuinely creative, fail so completely? The answer lies in a confluence of factors. Technological innovation that became financial burden, market timing that could not have been worse, and the eternal challenge of balancing artistic ambition with commercial viability.